it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 23 of my 2020 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be using Newton's Nook Christmas Campers. So I've stamped out these images on some Nina Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I wanted my camper to look like an Airstream, so I'm going to be coloring it with some cool grays. I'm using C0, C1, C3, and C5. I'm beginning with that C5, and I'm going to lay in some shadows from both sides and a little bit across the top as well. I'm ignoring the fact that there's different sections. I'm just going to pretend that those are different panels that are making up the metal side of my Airstream, and once it's all colored in, it's going to look nice and seamless. So once I have that C5 laid in, I'm going to begin to blend that out with the C3, just making sure to kind of scrub over the edge of that C5 and get it to break up and blend into the next shade. I'm also going to extend that shadow across the rest of the top of the Airstream, just so that it has a bit of definition up there as well. And then I'll bring in the C1, and I'm going to take that quite a bit of the ways across. I'm going to add some shadow on the left side of the door and above that door as well, and just kind of bring that color toward the center. I just want to have a little bit of a highlight left for that C0 when I get all done with these three darkest shades. I'm going to color around all of those little strings of lights carefully, because there's a lot of little details on this image that I don't want to get that darker gray color mixed in there. If it does, it's not like a big deal. I can still push some out with the Colorless Blender, but I'm trying to avoid them wherever possible. And now I'll just take that C0 and fill in the rest of that white space. I also decided to color in the hitch and the bottom area of the camper with those shades. I'm going to leave off the C0 for this parts though. I wanted it to be just a bit of a contrasting metallic color, so I'm using that C5 as my darkest again, but then I'm just going to use the C3 as my mid-tone and save a tiny bit of space for the C1. And that way it'll just be a very similar color tone, but slightly different. Not only did I leave off the C0, but I was a little bit more heavy-handed with my darker shades, and so I was able to get just a little bit of a different look to it. I did use the tiniest bit of that C0 on the very top of the wheel well, and now I'm going to use the C1 and the C0 to color in the center hubcap as well. Then I'm moving on to the actual wheel, and for that I'm going to use the C5, C7, and C9. So you can see that C9 is almost black. It's a super dark color, and I put that on kind of two sides, kitty corner from each other, and then I'm pulling towards each of them with the C7 and then filling in the space between with the C5. That just gives it a little bit more dynamics than coloring it a flat shade. I also decided that the door should be metal, so I'm going to go back to my C5, C3, and C1. I'm going to put a shadow with the C5 up under the awning and at the bottom there by the little footrest, and then I'm going to pull that color towards the center of the door with the C3. And then I'll use the C1 to fill in the rest of the space and just color around the little doorknob and the bottom edge of the Christmas wreath. For the windows, I'm using B41 and B45, and I'm going to put the darkest at the top underneath the awning for the window on the left, and then I just decided to mimic that also on the window on the right. And I'll pull down with the B41, just softening the edge of that B45 because it is quite a bit darker, and getting that soft and blended, and then flicking in a little bit from the bottom edge as well. And then for my green combo, I'm using G43, G46, and G29. And I'm going to start with the Christmas wreath. So I'm doing a super thin line with just the very tip of that G29. And then I'm going to begin to blend that out almost all the way to the edge with the G46, just leaving a little bit of room for that G43 so I do get a nice highlight on the outside edges. I'm also going to color my Christmas tree with these shades, and I'm sticking that G29 up at the very top of each of those sections, and then I'm going to pull down a little bit more with the G46, basically doing about 1/3 of the area there with each of the marker shades. And then again, just like with the wreath, I'm going to put that G43 on the outside edge for a nice highlight. And I'll use the G46 to color in the base of each bulb on the string of lights. For my reds, I'm going to use R24 and R29, and I'm going to use these shades to color in the 4 stockings that are hanging on the outside of the Airstream. So I use the R29 for a little shadow on the right hand side, and then blended toward the left with the R24. And then for the rest of the red objects, I wanted them to be just a slightly different shade of red. So I'm going to add in the R39 and use that for my darkest. So I'm going to use the R39, R29, and R24 for the bow on the Christmas wreath. And you can see how that just kind of really pops and adds like a different tone of red to that compared to the stockings. I'm also going to use that combination to color in the 2 little Santa hats on the plastic flamingo and on the camping chairs. For the awning, I wanted to do pink and white stripes on the awning, so I'm using R11 and R12 to do every other one. I used the R12 first and then blended that out with the R11. There wasn't quite enough contrast on there for me, so I am going to go back with that R12 and add a bit more depth on the right hand side and on the part where it kind of bends down. And then for my flamingo, I'm going to use those same shades, but I'm going to add in the R22 just to brighten it up a bit, and again just make it a different shade slightly. So I used the R22 and then the R12, and I didn't even bother with the R11. For the white striped awnings, I was going to use W00 and W1, but honestly it looked fine with just the W1, so I didn't bother even blending that out. And I also did all the little white parts of the stockings and the whites of the Christmas hats as well. I used E23 and E25 to color in the trunk of the Christmas tree. And then for the curtains and the camping chair, I wanted it to be kind of an army green, kind of like that camp style fabric that you often see chairs especially made out of, but I thought I would just do the curtains to match. So I used YG61, YG63, and YG67 for those. And so it's similar to the other greens, but just a little bit more of an olivey tone. So I think it just sets it apart a bit. So I just did the shading on the left hand side for the camping chair on the left, and then on the right hand side for the one on the right, since they're kind of turned toward each other. So they would have a little bit of a different light source there. And then I just blended out with the YG63 as my midtone and the YG61 for the lightest. And I did go over these with a second layer just to help with the saturation. For the Christmas lights, I decided to do red, green, and white. So I'm going to use R24 for the red, YG03 for the green. I wanted something that was just a bit brighter than the other green tones I'd been using. And then W1 for the white lights, and I'm just doing a tiny little sliver on the edge for the white lights so that they don't end up looking gray. And then I forgot to color in the flamingo's beak, so I'm going to grab my C7 and just add a little tip to the end of that, and then trim these out with their matching dies. The pattern papers that I'm using today are from the Simple Stories Winter Cottage collection, and I really liked this print here with the Christmas trees. I thought it was very similar to the style of the stamped Christmas tree. It's kind of tall and skinny. So I thought those would be fun to use and also just kind of fit with the whole campground feel. And then I also really liked this navy print with the pink stars. And I considered using a third print, but I ended up just sticking with these two here. So I'm going to trim down the tree print with the Lawn Fawn large stitch rectangle stackables. And I'm just taping that in place with a little bit of post-it tape. And then I'm going to take the reverse stitch scallop square windows and I'm going to line that up in the center toward the top part of the card and tape that down into place as well so it doesn't shift in my die cutting machine, and then it will create this little panel with the window with that nice stitched scalloped edging. I also took 2 of the Lawn Fawn stitched hillside borders to cut out some snow drifts. And I trimmed down that navy print with the pink stars just with my paper trimmer. And I'm going to glue the larger snowdrift towards the bottom and then tuck the shorter one up above. Then I'll pop this piece in my MISTI so that I can stamp my sentiment, and I'm using Lawn Fawn's Lobster ink to stamp the Merry Camper sentiment down towards the bottom right of the scene there. And then I'll remove that and pop in my card base. I'm using Lawn Fawn's Ballet Slippers cardstock, and I'm going to continue stamping with that lobster ink, and I'm going to use the other camper and the other sentiment in that set, and the sentiment just says home for the holidays. And I thought that that pink cardstock would just tie into the pink stars on the pattern paper and just be something a little bit fun and different for Christmas. So I've added some foam tape to the back of the frame. I'm going to peel off the release papers on the 2 parts that line the window top and bottom, and then also the 2 longer pieces on the side. And then I'm going to line that up over my background panel, make sure that I have that sentiment just where I want it. And then I can peel off the remaining 2 release papers from that foam tape and add some liquid glue to the back of the pattern paper. And then I will line this up with the front of my card very carefully. And once I'm sure that it's straight, I'll press it down into place. So now I'm ready to adhere my images, and I'm going to start with the camper since that's the largest one, and I'm going to adhere that toward the top of the bottom snowdrift. I wanted to leave myself enough room for them to set up camp out in front. So I've got these 2 little camping chairs. I'm going to put those accenting the left side of the sentiment. And then I have this little plastic flamingo with his Santa hat, which I think is so funny. This is my favorite image in the entire stamp set. I think it's just so clever and cute. So I'm going to add that over on the right hand side. And then the Christmas tree, I'm just kind of figuring out where I want to put that on the card. I knew it was going to go in that top right corner. I just wasn't sure which snowdrift I wanted to put it behind, but I ended up tucking it between the 2 of them. So I'll just press that down into place, and then I of course have to add some glitter. So I'll grab some Stardust stickles and I'm going to add that to the star on the top of the Christmas tree, which I did color pink to match the stars on the background paper. And then I'm also going to add it to each of the little light bulbs on the string of lights and to the tops of the stockings and the whites of the Santa hats. So I'll lift that up to the camera so you can see how that catches the light and give you another peek at the inside. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I post new ones every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you're interested in any of the products that I used today, you'll find those listed and linked below the video. If you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos from previous years of holiday card series that I thought might also interest you. You can click on either one of those to check them out. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.